I had been working as a home health aide for about 3 years when I got the call from a woman named Evelyn. She needed someone to watch her elderly father, Harold, overnight. Evelyn explained that Harold had advanced dementia and needed constant supervision. She worked long hours as a nurse and couldn't afford to put him in a facility, so she relied on aides like me to fill in the gaps. I was used to caring for people with disabilities and dementia, so I agreed to take the shift. Little did I know, this would be the most unsettling night of my career. The house was a modest, two-story home in a quiet neighborhood. Evelyn greeted me at the door, her face etched with exhaustion. She introduced me to Harold, who was sitting in a recliner in the living room, staring blankly at the television. He didn't acknowledge me when I said hello, but Evelyn assured me that was normal. He's mostly nonverbal now, she said, but he can get agitated at night. Just keep an eye on him and make sure he doesn't wander. Evelyn gave me a quick tour of the house, showing me Harold's bedroom, the bathroom, and the small guest room where I could rest if needed. She handed me a list of emergency contacts and a bottle of melatonin. If he gets restless, give him one of these. It usually calms him down, she said. Then, with a hurried goodbye, she was out the door, leaving me alone with Harold. The first few hours were uneventful. Harold stayed in his recliner, occasionally mumbling to himself. I sat on the couch, scrolling through my phone and glancing at him every so often to make sure he was okay. Around 10 p.m., I decided to help him get ready for bed. I gently guided him to his room, helped him change into his pajamas, and tucked him in. He didn't resist, but his eyes never left mine, wide and unblinking. It was unnerving, but I chalked it up to the dementia. I went back to the living room and settled in for the night. Around midnight, I heard a noise from upstairs, a soft thud, like something falling. I froze, listening. Then I heard Harold's voice, low and guttural, muttering words I couldn't understand. I grabbed the melatonin and a glass of water and hurried upstairs. Harold was standing in the middle of his room, facing the wall. His hands were clenched into fists, and his shoulders were tense. "Harold," I said softly, "are you okay?" He didn't respond. I stepped closer and gently touched his arm. He flinched and turned to face me, his eyes wild and unfocused. "It's me, Harold. I'm here to help you," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. He stared at me for a moment, then suddenly lunged forward, grabbing my wrist with surprising strength. I dropped the glass, and it shattered on the floor. "Who are you?" he growled, his voice low and menacing. "What are you doing in my house?" I tried to pull away, but his grip was like iron. "Harold, it's me. I'm your aide. Evelyn hired me to watch you tonight," I said, my voice trembling. He didn't seem to hear me. His eyes darted around the room, and he started muttering again, this time louder and more frantic. I managed to pry his fingers off my wrist and step back, my heart pounding. I decided to give him the melatonin, hoping it would calm him down. I handed him the pill and the water, and after a moment of hesitation, he took them. I guided him back to bed and waited until he seemed to settle. Then I cleaned up the broken glass and went back downstairs, shaken but relieved. I tried to stay awake after that, but exhaustion eventually got the better of me. I dozed off on the couch, only to be jolted awake by a loud crash from upstairs. I bolted upright, my heart racing. The house was eerily silent, but I knew something was wrong. I grabbed my phone and crept up the stairs, my footsteps muffled by the carpet. When I reached Harold's room, the door was wide open. The bed was empty and the window was open, the curtains fluttering in the breeze. Panic surged through me. I rushed to the window and looked out, but it was too dark to see anything. "Harold," I called, my voice echoing in the empty house. There was no response. I ran downstairs and out the front door, scanning the yard for any sign of him. The street was deserted, the only sound the distant hum of traffic. I was about to call Evelyn when I heard a noise in the backyard, a low, guttural growl that sent chills down my spine. I hesitated, then grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen and headed outside. The backyard was overgrown, the grass reaching up to my knees. I shone the flashlight around, my hands shaking. Then I saw him. Harold was crouched in the corner of the yard, his back to me. He was muttering again, but this time I could make out the words. "They're coming," he said, over and over. "They're coming." "Harold," I said, try and keep my voice steady. "It's me. Let's go back inside, okay?" He didn't move. I stepped closer, the beam of the flashlight illuminating his hunched form. That's when I saw it, a small, dark shape on the ground in front of him. I moved the light closer and gasped. It was a dead bird, its feathers matted with blood. Harold was holding a rock in his hand, his fingers stained red. I stumbled back, my stomach churning. Harold turned to look at me, his eyes gleaming in the darkness. "They're coming," he said again, his voice a hoarse whisper. Then he stood up, the rock still clutched in his hand, and started walking toward me. I backed away, my mind racing. This wasn't just dementia. This was something else, something darker. I turned and ran back to the house, slamming the door behind me. I locked it and called Evelyn, my hands trembling so badly I could barely dial a number. She answered on the first ring, her voice groggy with sleep. "Evelyn, it's me. Something's wrong with Harold. He's outside and he's not himself," I stammered. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then Evelyn sighed. "I'll be right there," she said. I waited by the door, peering out the window. Harold was still in the backyard, pacing back and forth like a caged animal. When Evelyn arrived, she took one look at him and shook her head. "He's done this before," she said, her voice heavy with resignation. She went outside and gently guided Harold back into the house, speaking to him in soothing tones. He followed her without resistance, his earlier aggression gone. Evelyn put Harold to bed and came back downstairs, where I was sitting on the couch, still shaken. "I'm sorry you had to deal with that," she said. "He's never hurt anyone, but sometimes he gets like this. It's the dementia. He doesn't know what he's doing." I nodded, but I couldn't shake the image of Harold crouched over that dead bird, his eyes filled with something I couldn't quite name. The rest of the night passed uneventfully, but I couldn't relax. Every creak of the house, every rustle of the wind outside, made me jump. I kept replaying Harold's words in my mind. "They're coming." Who were they? And why did he seem so afraid? Around 4 a.m., I heard Harold's door creak open again. I froze, listening. Footsteps shuffled down the hallway, slow and deliberate. I grabbed the flashlight and crept to the bottom of the stairs. Harold was standing at the top, silhouetted against the dim light from his room. He was holding something in his hand, a small, rectangular object. I couldn't make out what it was. "Harold," I whispered. He didn't respond. He just stood there, staring down at me. Then he raised his hand and pointed at me with the object. My heart skipped a beat. It was a photograph. He held it out, as if offering it to me, but I didn't move. After a moment, he let it fall to the floor and shuffled back to his room. I waited until I heard his door close before I climbed the stairs. The photograph was lying face down on the carpet. I picked it up and turned it over. It was an old, faded picture of Harold and a group of people standing in front of a large, decrepit house. They were all smiling, but something about the image felt off. The house in the background looked familiar. It was the same house I was standing in now. I flipped the photo over. On the back, in shaky handwriting, was a single word: run. I never went back to that house. Evelyn called me a few times after that, asking if I could fill in, but I always made excuses. I couldn't forget the look in Harold's eyes that night, or the way he had whispered, "They're coming." It was as if he had seen something real, something terrifying. And whatever it was, I didn't want to be there when it arrived. A few weeks later, I heard through the grapevine that Evelyn had moved Harold to a care facility. The house was put up for sale, but it sat on the market for months. No one wanted to buy it. Rumor had it that the house was haunted, that strange things happened there at night. I didn't believe in ghosts, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong with that place. One day, out of curiosity, I drove by the house. The yard was overgrown, the windows dark. As I sat in my car, staring at the house, I noticed something in the upstairs window, a figure, standing motionless, watching me. I couldn't make out the face, but I knew it wasn't Harold. My heart raced as I put the car in gear and drove away, vowing never to return. To this day, I don't know what happened in that house. Maybe it was just Harold's dementia playing tricks on him and on me, or maybe there was something else, something darker, lurking in the shadows. Either way, I learned that night that some doors are better left unopened and some mysteries are better left unsolved.